Okay, so today, welcome, is communication again. Yes, and we've been talking about communication for so many times, and I think you should be expert in that, right? Let's see about that. So today we're going to talk about, so if you look at the schedule, you probably see that we use communicating with seniors. But I think we want to use the term age-friendly communication rather than senior, because it is actually a communication skills that we're going to talk about that you can apply in any circumstances when you're talking with people at any age. So that is a lot of transferable skills there. First of all, before we start, I know like with seniors, like I'm not sure whether you're aware, there are different terms when we're addressing people who are older in our community, such as seniors. Have you heard of older adults? Elderlies? Yeah. So have you noted, are you aware, is there any difference between these terms? Well, in the city of Richmond, it's really interesting. If you've been following, they have their different strategy, different plans. If you've been following that, you see about a decade ago, they were using the term seniors. And in the 5 years ago, they changed over to older adults. But recently, they are using seniors again. So I don't know, I personally think they're the same, right? And when we say, when we describe someone who's a senior or senior citizen, so kind of it is with respect as well, kind of just saying, you're old. Okay, so a lot of times is how we communicate the message. And then elderly is, if we say, we have old elderly, kind of, it probably will be more like referring to a more structured community or social structure that you would say elderly, like for the First Nation, the elders, right? If you use the word, but in a lot of families we have people who are older at home. They're our elderly parents, and so we refer to them as older, right? And sometimes they would use the term mature adults, which I really don't like. Okay, so let's just move on to starting today.
So if you look at the numbers here, the senior group is a group to be reckoned with. The number of people that represent the total population in Canada. In 2010, it was 14%. In 2022, 19%.
Okay, let's guess what will become in 2030. Which is only just a few years from now, right? So in 2022, that's last year, it is 1 in 5. So how many people we have here? 25 or 20? So 1 in 5, so we can count who are the seniors. So 20%. What do you guess in the year 2030? We're all talking about aging population. Yeah, 22.5, so it's very close to 25. So 25, it is not a small number. That means 1 in 4. If you are in a family of 4 people, then 1 likely to be a senior, right? So.
And this population is going to continue to increase based on the statistics. We have baby boomers that were born between 1946 and 1965 who will age in there and become a senior also. So they're a group that we need to be able to communicate with and to serve and to value. So they're worth doing, and that's what we want to talk about today is how to be the best volunteer we can in communicating with them.
So what is age-friendly communication? So what do you think? Age-friendly communication. So when you try to communicate with people, but then you are also mindful of their
discrimination.
Age. Yeah. So what would that be? In your opinion, what do you think would be the age-friendly communication? So if you imagine yourself talking to a child, you probably would use more childish or a child-like language, because they may not be able to understand you. And that is true. But how about for seniors? So if you use childlike conversation or words or your attitude, are you assuming that they are not able to understand you? That might be the case because nowadays with so many, like a lot of the Alzheimer or dementia illnesses with the older population, that might be the case. But generally, we cannot assume that. So the age-friendly approach is better than just say communicating with seniors. So it's like, oh, you only use that with seniors. So that's a little bit of the separation there, right? So what it is here is communication for everyone, regardless of their age, but including the senior population. Right? So kind of that is what we want to define the age-friendly communication.
So today we're going to look at our attitudes and how, based on the communication that we do, because we have a different attitude than we should have when we're communicating with adults, seniors versus children versus another population. We want to look at the changes that come with the person aging and respect them and how that impacts the person's interaction with the community and with their social life and so on. And look at the 10 tips that we've got that for communicating with seniors. And then how do we interact with them? And it's, again, Della was saying, just because some of the changes happen in life, the seniors are still seniors. They are adults. They are not children and deserve to be treated as people with experience and as adults.
Mm-hmm. So when we go along in this presentation, a lot of that you have already learned in previous trainings. So I understand, you have done the disability awareness and sensitivity training. So a lot of that, the same concept can be applied here. Okay, so we want to kind of have your input in this. Feel free to kind of, say the answer if you know that, or you have anything that you want to talk about, then feel free to add in with that. Okay. So that is the agenda here. So first of all, we want to see is check your attitude. So if you apply for a volunteer position, you know that you're going to work with seniors. So that is a lot of them, like visiting seniors at the senior home or in their own home, driving seniors around, or supporting seniors in completing forms. And when we do our income tax clinic here, we have, I would say, about 70% of the people coming to have their tax done, they're seniors. Yeah, so kind of, we interact with seniors a lot. And if you apply for a volunteer position, it's very likely that you will get a position like that, right? So first of all, we say check our attitude, because there's a lot of preconception, misconception, myth about senior people or working with seniors. So if you look at that diagram there, so do we assume that seniors are all deaf? They can't listen, they can't hear you properly? So every time you see a senior, what do? Use a loudspeaker or you speak very loudly, right? So that is this very similar, like interacting with people with disabilities. If we see a person in a wheelchair, sometimes people would assume that the person also, other than the disability, physical disability, they may have an intellectual disability. So when they talk to them, they would use talk very slowly, very loudly, So all this is the preconception thinking, you are assuming. So when we interact with senior, we always assume that, maybe they're not hearing well or not seeing well. And what do you think of senior when it comes to you? How about, have you thought about, okay, I'm going to visit the senior home today. So if I'm a young girl of 20, I usually just wear tank tops and shorts. Do I just go there with tank tops and shorts? Right? Sometimes if you think, oh, maybe they don't like me wearing like that, so we'll put on more proper attire. Sometimes people would do like that, right? But I'm not saying that is not, I'm just using it as example. Sometimes we just think that, that might be what they like. So, like maybe I should not talk about nowadays pop culture because they don't know anything about what's popular now. Maybe, I won't talk about, like the places I usually go to because they won't go there. They don't know. So there's a lot of the assumption there, right? So that is with that. And then beware of ageism, racism, and sexism. So with that preconception, it is a little bit of ageism. With ageism, is sometimes we're thinking, okay, you're old, you cannot run fast. Oh, you're already 60 years old? Oh no, you better walk slowly. Oh, do you need some help? Climbing the stairs? But if without knowing the person a bit better and you're assuming that is ageism, because of the age you assume that. And that is very common in a lot of workplaces, when they even without seeing that, we look at the resume and I normally look at this, okay, what year did you graduate from university or high school? Oh, wow, that old. That's how people's reaction to age, right? And sometimes racism and sexism is, if it is a female, older adult, and maybe with a not a Caucasian background, so the thought of that is quickly coming up. You're conjuring some image in your head, right? This person might be very frail and cannot communicate in English, and like very picky, whatever. I'm just throwing it out, right? But it's based on people's experience, with different people. And beware of patronizing, condescending, or childish expression. So that is what we talked about earlier, like we want to be friendly to people who are seniors, but sometimes we need to treat them as the same as anyone else until you learn more about that and then understand what needs or accommodation they require. So they may be really hard of hearing. We don't know. So if that is the case, then, perhaps you need to speak louder or you speak slower. That is possible. But then do you do that, up front without even knowing the person can hear you or not? And also, like if you do the sensitivity training, you also be aware is we don't recommend you, even knowing that the person might be hard of hearing, we don't recommend you to shout or yell. Why? Because the person may be using hearing aid. My goodness, don't yell it. Close my hearing aid. Yeah. So kind of without knowing a little more about the person. And then you jump to assumption. It is not very cool. And then language reflects your attitude, right? So kind of, and with this is we have a checklist first. Like if I say that, does it sound childish? Or like talking to a child. Childish is not a very good expression. We talk about it. Childlike is more like you, you either treat them like a child or you behave like a child. So kind of both ways is not very cool.
Yeah, if you look at the changes that come with these faces here, I love this slide. I love thinking that person goes from the one on the left, the younger lady, right up to the older one on the right. And I think we look at all those physical changes and we look at the other changes internally that happen to us as we age, and so we often seniors will face physical changes, sensory changes, cognitive function changes, social network changes. We get more isolated often, and emotional changes. A lot happens in our lives over the years, even at my age, and as we get older, if we lose our partners or our homes or our less stability, right? And it affects our social network. It affects if our thinking abilities lessen or change in some way. Hearing changes or sight changes. It affects everything we do in life, and it needs to be acknowledged when we're interacting with seniors, but also not in a general way. Each person is an individual, and you want to sort of take the time to understand how aging, if it's affected them, how it's affected them.
And especially nowadays, like people are more conscious about their health, so they look after themselves well. So as compared with maybe 50 years ago, people what age would you call people who are senior maybe 50 years ago? Maybe you turn 50 or 60 already, wow. And then I know in a Chinese proverb saying, if you turn 70, oh, this is really a rarity in the society. It's so unusual, right? But nowadays, 60 years old is not really, you can't even notice any change. Maybe not obvious changes, physical changes, but of course there are changes, subtle changes. And then, even people live, the longevity is so much, longer, 80. I have a lot of friends, they're turning 80 years old, and I was so shocked. You're 80? You don't even know that. But there are changes involved there. Okay, so kind of, especially when we are interacting with seniors, that is one thing. So a lot of people use this example. If you put a frog into a pot of hot water, they jump around like crazy. But if you put the frog in the pot of cold water and you bring the temperature to boiling gradually, they will notice it very quickly. So it's just similar to aging. A lot of us, we don't realize that ourselves. But there are subtle, like pains here, pains there. Short of breath, and this different minor illnesses and chronic illnesses, that marks the age. However, will that significantly impact one's life? May or may not be. So knowing that is one thing is the person you are providing the support or service, they may not be aware that they're actually getting into the senior population. Or if you call them, hey, senior. Nowadays, senior, who can tell me what is the age when you start, can identify as a senior? 55. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes it is. In some
Sometimes
places
it is.
55, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But officially, it's 65, right? That is 65 people retire. They get their old age security. Old age security. So you get that. But 55, they start providing services for people who start the aging process, and that is true. And you can register as a member at our senior center now if you turn 55, and it gives you a lot of benefits. And people would go for that. You can sign up for classes free.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you can use their facility at a discounted price. Why not? Mm-hmm. Right? So kind of that is a lot of changes. How about social changes and emotional changes? What do you think what they are? What are the social changes? Like the social changes is especially people approaching retirement. I remember in the older days, people celebrated their retirement. It's a big thing, right? Now you retire and people might ask you, what do you do then at home? You're staying at home all the time. Come out and volunteer. So it's like it's not such a, a celebration in their life anymore. And emotional changes, I think, is the most subtle of all. All of a sudden, when I turn 55, and I'm a senior now. And when you turn 65, I'm an old age security recipient. You'll be surprised.
It's interesting though. I don't see it in myself until recently. I know that when my sister, my nephew had children, or my sister had children, and I've watched them grow up, and one of them's married now and has children and that, and I think, wow. And then I remember I used to have brown hair. What happened there? I'm no older, but he is. And it's interesting, and then you start acknowledging some of the other little things that are happening along the way, and okay, there's a reason for that. There's a reason, because apparently I'm older too, not just my nephew. And it's interesting.
Yeah, when you see children growing up very fast, and the next thought is, I'm also aging very fast. Right? It's like that, yeah. Okay, so what's aging to do with communication? Right, so we realize a lot of the subtle changes happening, or the obvious changes happening. How does it affect our communication? So when I started wearing my reading glasses, yeah, then when you get to the point that you finally need to use your reading glasses, it's already a big compromise, because it's a long struggle for myself. Okay, finally I use that, I can see things more clearly. But how much time I actually struggle not to wear the glasses, or in denial, is so common. right? You know, like it's ask people to stand further, holding the book like that. You know, like this is that. So you know, like with the visual changes, then of course, one thing is reading menus, reading labels. I don't know how frustrated I got. I can't see this. So you wear glasses.
At first, I thought it's not enough light. I say, can you turn off the thing? They say, you need glasses, not light.
Why is the font getting smaller?
Yeah, that's
I don't
right.
understand why they do that now.
And how about the online services and websites? You know, a lot of the services now, the application forms and everything, you apply their resources, information online. So you think, yeah, that's good. You know, we can just go online and do that. When you get to the point that you might need glasses to see what's online, or you want to use the accessibility feature of the website to enlarge the font to so big that you can only read 2 letters on the screen, it's just ridiculous, right? So actually it affects people, you know, with that. Sometimes it's not even the cognitive side, it's just the vision. And signage on public buildings, street signs, you know, like especially on the street signs at night, like you say, you know, so difficult to decipher what street we're on, you know, if you don't know the place. Banking machines, the glare on the screen, right? Information available only in prints, televised information, glossy paper, and color brochures. So a lot of that, you know, we don't even know. It just suddenly you pick up a glossy brochure and you can't really see clearly. It's because of the glow, of the glare. You know, like that, you know, you don't know. In fact, that is something with your eyesight, not with the information. Hearing, okay, so this is even funnier, right? And then if you talk to your older parents, and then, you know, you suddenly realize that they're speaking louder. Why? You see, is my parent angry with me? It's no, they can't hear their own voice. So they raise their voice. And then they will complain, what are you saying? I can't hear you. Right? So that is very common with that. And telephone. Telephone is a big thing. Yeah. People get on the telephone and they can't hear clearly. The television, radio, and all these different things. Okay, and then how about the physical changes with agility and the mobility? So the banking machine and online banking, so kind of it just require you to kind of put in the password and things like that, and then coupled with your poor eyesight, not enough light, that is very difficult even just to punch in the information. The kids requiring assembly, you know, like putting things together, the product packages, and then opening up things. You know, how many seniors with that? A lot of the times it's the minor things that we are not paying attention to, like the dexterity of fingers. You know, like all of a sudden, I used to be able to open the package very easily. You know, and now suddenly I cannot do that anymore because, you know, the grip, the fingers strength has deteriorated. Right? So kind of people, they don't know, okay, they make it tougher now. You know, in fact, this is the change with our ability. And the social emotional change is more emphasized on the personal contact. You know, a lot of times, I don't know whether, you know, people, they get older, they don't want to get along or associated with people older than they are. They want to associate it with people younger than they are. That is also a sign of, you know, getting older. And at times, sometimes when they realize of their changes, they probably don't want to go out. Because, you know, they go out and then, okay, so I actually heard a lot of, you know, from different people's parents saying, oh, okay, you know, they don't want to go on a trip because, you know, they become a burden to other people. Maybe they take at least an hour to get ready in the morning, and all these different things kind of affect them. So their social life and social style and the pattern might change because of the aging. So when you interact with them, you know, like you bear that in mind because a lot of things are not the same in their life anymore. Although they may still stay at the stage that they think they could still do things and they do things in a certain way, but now it is not that same way anymore.
So what do you think about age-friendly communication now that we've discussed it a little bit? my mom lives with me and she's 90, and Vancouver Sun has stopped publishing the newspaper on Mondays. Every other day she gets it in a hand, and she needs that tangible paper. She needs to flip through all those sections, and she needs to do that crossword puzzle and complain about it because they've changed it all the time, and needs to do that every day. And she needs to tell me all the news stories and so on. Now she's just like that. She's supposed to go sit in front of the computer and do that on Mondays because they don't publish it anymore on Sundays. She is mortified by that, and I'm mortified by that because I feel like the decision, I understand the saving money thing, but it leaves out. My mom's very good at a computer, but she's 90 and she does not want to sit in front of the computer and read it. She wants her physical paper. And I feel like, what are other ways that we can, that affect people that are of senior age? Do we assume they have glasses, and do we assume that, like, my mom has a severe, she lives with me and she has a severe hearing impairment, cannot make phone calls.
So let's use the picture here, just for the point of discussion. So how would they say using a telephone would help with an age-friendly communication? So you're going to call someone who may be hard of hearing because of aging. So how would you improve that communication, knowing the person is, in that position? But a very simple way is like this. If we call someone and then they can't hear you on the phone, so you might want to ask them, is there a capability on your phone to increase the volume? That's a lot of the phones can do that. So maybe increasing the volume, they can hear better. Right? It's a very simple approach. If they don't have that, maybe a very old style phone, then they don't do that. If they do a cell phone, even on the cell phone, you can, just increase the volume quite easily. So increasing the volume is good. Or is there a lot of background noise that would affect their hearing? Because, maybe they are outside at the bus stop, the bus passing, like they cannot hear clearly. So maybe you want to call at another time, or they can find a place that is quieter. So sometimes it all depends on the urgency of the call. Then you can also kind of design it a little bit to have better communication. How about glasses? So you say, you can't see well, give you a reading glass. This is quite condescending way of doing that. But maybe you can prompt the person, do you have something that can help you to read more? I actually use, sometimes I forget to bring my reading glasses. I have a way of doing that. It's going to a restaurant. And even sometimes with my reading glasses, I can't read the menu.
I figured out the trick to that. You look at the menu on the internet, on the website, before you go to the restaurant. And then people think you have good eyesight.
That is true. I do it a more stupid way, like take out your cell phone, take a picture, and then enlarge it. That works, right? Or if you are going out with a senior, what you can do, hey, let me just recommend to you, introduce to you the dish of the day, and then take over and start reading the menu, or ask them, what would you like? Pasta? Okay, they have this pasta. And then you can help them in a more subtle way, not just, you can't see, let me tell you what's on the menu. And that is a very blunt way of doing that. And then in that is a bit more condescending. Okay, how about the computer? So do we all assume that a senior are not very good at computer, right?
My mother is very good at the computer.
Yeah, really.
because she can't communicate by phone, because she's got a hearing impairment. Her way of communicating with the outside world at 90 years of age is by email. And she's very good at it.
So there's no fixed rule with that, but usually sometimes it is a bit challenging for them, especially if they're not used to using the computer, looking for menus, doing emails. But a lot of people are, even in the older age group, they are very good on emails. They write a lot of emails and they read or everything on the. So but saying that is, do we all know that on the computer, that is the accessibility features, like if people with low vision, They, other than just using the enlarge, the zooming effect, they can have different contrast effect. Or if you cannot see really, you can have the computer, if you have the software installed, you can have the computer reading everything on it for you. Right? So that is a lot of technology that can help, with that. And with computer also, that was a very meaningful volunteer program. I don't know whether you have heard of it. Is actually assisting the seniors to go on Zoom or Skype, so to meet with their family, overseas. And I think that is a very meaningful program, because a lot of times they cannot do that, and then that really using technology to help them to connect to the world. Okay, so we're going into the tips of communicating with seniors. So we kind of, the things, like I said, with other communication tactics are very straightforward and common knowledge. So if you use some common sense, you probably already know about this, and then you don't need. But we want to re-emphasize, that when you communicate, always with seniors is speak clearly. They may be hard of hearing. Even we don't know that whether they are really hard of hearing or not. But one thing is we don't want to kind of be so loud and slow that it can, it's very close to patronizing them, right? So we want to kind of speak clearly, and then at a reasonable speed with that. So some of the words that maybe a lot of the acronyms that we normally say, okay, BTW and LOL and whatever, they may not understand, so why we try not to use that. And then always do not raise the voice unless they ask you to speak louder. Because they will do that. They will let you know, oh, I can't hear you clearly. Can you speak louder? That may be really because of the background noise, they can't hear you, or because they are hard of hearing, they can't hear you. Then you say, oh no, are you deaf? No, you don't need to do that. You just kind of speak a little bit louder. That is out of respect, because the purpose is to communicate, And then speak louder if necessary, but do not shout. Enunciate clearly, do not talk too quickly. That is like if you practice that as a, if you do it as a general sense when you kind of go out, when you do your volunteering, maybe when you communicate with your friends, you speak in a different tone manner at all. But when we come out, like especially say for instance when we do presentation, I would speak a little bit slower, right? And then when you talk to some people, they may have English as a second language. We will do the a simple language approach. So kind of we don't do that. But if you speak to your professor, you want to impress him, maybe you want to use all the jargons that you have learned. So kind of the different contexts. And keep sentences short and simple. Focus on one idea at a time, and phrase differently, and use different words. So this is also very important, especially when you interact with seniors with some cognitive function loss, right? So I don't know, like for me, I'm already experienced that. Is sometimes the words I use a lot and I suddenly forgot, right? So it's like, oh, I just cannot. But eventually it will come back. But for some people, they may not. If they are having some chronic illness like dementia or being senile, sometimes it happens at the older age. So what would you notice with people like that? One thing is they start talking about their long time ago, what happened when they were young. A lot of parents would do that. They start telling you the stories when they were young, because that is a bit more vivid to them rather than what happened just yesterday. This may be an earlier sign of Alzheimer or dementia, right? And the other thing is, so in that case, they may be really losing some function. Maybe they're forgetful, or there may be some underlying reason. Say if they're in pain, and then their level of concentration is lower. So kind of there's a lot of reason behind that. So when we say things, if you keep repeating the same things, and I don't know about you, if for me is if I'm repeating the same thing, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, my voice will be really loud because we got agitated, right? So sometimes you want to phrase things in a different way. And we talk about different types of communication. If you cannot explain it with words, you can. So you say something they don't understand. Then what else can you use to explain, to communicate? Signs, yeah, pictures, gestures, demonstration. There are a lot of things, a lot of ways that you can use, right? If they don't understand, and this is the same as interacting with people with disabilities. If a person you talk to a person with developmental disabilities, if they don't understand the word, sometimes it's difficult for them to understand some abstract concept. They will never get it. It doesn't matter how many times you say, then use another way. Use demonstration, right, to show them.
And we'll talk a little bit about patience along the way too. And it can be really, really hard. If you've had to repeat something 3 times and it doesn't get understood the way you need it to be understood, it's very difficult sometimes to try again and have exactly the same tone of voice, so that person doesn't think that you're upset with them or you're being rude or disrespectful. It's a challenge because we all too are human, and the communication is tough sometimes that way. So
I think the hard part with condescending is sometimes we're not aware of it. That we're not aware we are saying things in a condescending way, right? So kind of that would be, sometimes we need to have some self-reflection. Yeah. If people say the same sentence or they give you the same message, are you happy with that? You may not be, right?
and sometimes again, what's the best way to accommodate the hearing loss? Is it turning up the volume? Is it writing it down? Whatever works to get the message across. And you want to work on one thing at a time and speaking slower. That's the one thing I do fast in life, and it's not what it gets heard. I know I have to we've talked about eye contact and looking straight at, so that my person can lip read what I'm saying, and doing it in a way that's not condescending, a way that respects their need to listen and to hear in the way that they need. And again, remembering that adult, that senior citizen is a senior citizen, is an adult, not a child, and you don't want to be patronizing. You don't want to do things in a disrespectful way that makes it sound like you're frustrated because you should be able to do this by now.
Oh, remember they're usually a wealth of experience. You know, even they may not have the same exposure to the modern day, but they have a lot of experience. Oh, I don't mean that the experience would apply to you, but listening to them doesn't hurt. And listen to what they are saying. So what did we call this in the previous training? So it's active listening, right? We're active listening. I know you all know that. So kind of active listening is just a little bit more than just listening. So by now I'm not going to get into that. I hope that you all know what active listening is and what's the difference with just a casual conversation. So listening to them is number one is, and this is the same with people. Maybe you interact with people with speech impediment or they stuttered. So we do have the tendency to complete the sentence for them because we're impatient. Okay, I want to get that. Oh, you want to get the key? Oh, no, I want to get the water. So kinds of we're assuming things, but you can still help them to do that. So a lot of times is you want to ask questions that is easy for them to respond. Right? I think we talked about that in this disability awareness training. We normally would recommend in communication is to use open-end questions so that people don't just answer yes or no, right? Because you want to extend the conversation. But in sometimes, like in some situation, you want for them to answer yes or no if they have a speech impediment. If you're interacting with a senior person who are not talking so fluently, such as maybe a survivor of a stroke, or they have some kind of dementia, then probably you want to ask questions so that they can answer yes or no, rather than for them to explain a long thing and then they're just not going to get the point. Okay, and then give them time to respond, and this is very important. Give them time. So you ask something, and okay, did you hear me? I'm asking you this. Okay, then they start processing again. Okay, no, let me show you again. So give them time to respond, and then if you know the person, and then let them. They may be thinking about the conversation, and then how to respond. So they give them time to do that. And listening goes both ways. So you listen to them, and then also at times they want to hear what you say as well. And then sometimes we learn about this is one of the technique that you can use to verify that what you heard is really what they say. And the last point here is remember we talked about paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is a very useful technique when you interact with seniors and kind of help them out to, is that what you want? Is that what you mean? Rather than for them to start everything over again and repeat the same thing and then which you don't understand. So those are the few things about the active listening skills. So we're not going to kind of go through that again. A lot of that you have already learned about, and that is in your previous training.
So we want to, again, make sure that you're in the right environment if you're going to have a conversation with someone who's elderly. You want to make sure that they know that you're listening to them, and it's really difficult to do that, and that you're hearing what they're saying. It's really difficult to do that if you have a lot of distractions, if you have loud noises in the background, if you're sitting in a social gathering, you want to make sure that the noise level is as low as it can be, and you don't have distracting activities, because again, sometimes if we're looking around at different things, if we don't have eye contact with that person, it's not allowing them to feel special, not allowing them to know that we're hearing what they're saying, and we want to hear what they're saying. And the other thing is, if the person, if you're not sure if they have difficulties in understanding what's going on, or awareness of all the activities going on and the stimulation, making sure they're in the middle of something so they can see them from both angles, whether or not what they want to hear, and maybe hear bits of the stories and conversations that are going around, if they're in the middle of a situation as opposed to one end or the other.
Yeah, that one is a bit, like normally when we go to a big, say, family dinner, or then the head of the table always reserved for the elderly, right? So they're sitting at the head of the table, but we never think of they may be left out of the conversation because they can't hear clearly, right? So in a way, if you want to include them, put them in the middle. It's easier. Or even if it is in a circle, it is it's also a good way of seating, right? And then with the conversation, you always try to engage them. Otherwise, they just seem like just strangers sitting at the same table.
The other thing about facing a person when you're communicating with them, if that person has a hearing impairment, they may not be able to hear well, but some can definitely lip read very well, and you'll get the message across. So it's if you look directly at them, speak slowly and as clearly as you can, often people can lip read and get what you're saying that way.
Talking about that, let me ask you this, and see how much you remember from the disability awareness training. So if you are talking with someone who's lip reading, and you can choose an environment to do that, what would that be? So kind of we need to think about that, because we don't read the lips, so we never care about it. We hear even you see some facial expression and we hear the sound, then you can put them all together. But if you only cannot hear the sound and only need to see the facial expression and the movement of the lips, you need to make sure that they have a clear picture of your face, which is not shining a light onto your face. You probably want the light coming, gently from all around, or obviously not from the back. So kind of think of that. It's very simple. Because when they face you, you probably don't know how you looked to them. So you probably need to experiment around. If I turn around, can I see Dina's face? Maybe I go to another angle, I can't really see her face well. So those are the important things that you want to consider when communicating, right? And this is the same for communicating with seniors or people with disabilities.
I think we also I take my body language for granted sometimes. I'll sit like this and I'll talk. And it's because it's relaxing, and I'm having a good conversation with my friend, but I'm covering up half of my mouth, and it makes lip reading very, very hard to do. So I want to be careful not to do that and look at the person. And it's sometimes we take things for granted.
Oh, that is the same thing during the pandemic. So a lot of awareness being raised for communicating with people who will read the lips, because everyone's wearing masks. It's kind of totally impossible for them to communicate. Yeah, and we do have a gentleman who come in here often, and then he got really frustrated about people wearing masks, to them. But then, so that is understandable. And the other thing, I don't know whether you have met with people who are deaf blind, so they cannot hear and they cannot see. So how do they communicate? They can communicate using signs, right? But then the person interacting with them need to know how to read signs, right? That is one thing. But if they actually, for them to learn signs is also very difficult. But I actually have seen them communicate like this. It is a very long process. I've met them actually in person. So what the person would do is actually would have someone as an attendant or companion, and this person would write on the person's hand, and this other person will translate for that. And then they would do exactly the same reverse process to communicate when someone said something. They would, because that is the person doesn't know any sign language, right? So they would kind of write on the hand of the person and then to communicate. So it is a bit challenging. Okay, so accept differences of opinions when we communicate with seniors. So like listen to all sides. Sometimes it's the important thing here is seniors. They have experienced a lot. They have a lot of life experience, and they like to share that with you. And a lot of times they want to say that is the right way to do things, and maybe you don't agree, right? So but again, we want to respect each other's opinion. There's no right or wrong in things, and do not disregard those who disagree with you, or vice versa, and then agree to disagree. So here might be able to establish when you are volunteering, right? So sometimes I find this is a bit challenging when you interact with your family. Like really it is, to agree to disagree is a very difficult thing. But with the volunteer, the people you support, maybe so you can say that I totally respect how you feel and what you think about these things, but we all have different opinion, and that would be kind of the end of it, right? Sometimes it is worthwhile to pursue, and sometimes it is not. It all depending on what you do, right? If you're supporting the individual in some arts and crafts, why bother to argue about politics? This is irrelevant. So sometimes we want to kind of pick our battles a little bit.
You want to make sure that you're considering what it's like to be old. Think about it and be considerate of some of the changes that people experience that we've talked about. Keep them engaged in conversations. I think discussing the Vancouver Sun newspaper is amazing because it gives you know what's going on in the world a little bit, and it's good to create opinions and have opinions and be able to feel alive when you're expressing them and being heard to express them and even having those discussions where people agree and disagree with them and agree to disagree.
We actually had some argument about, not argument, we have some different of opinions about this one. Consider what it is like to be old. So, do we need to be, to have experienced that and then to know how old people are thinking? Right, and do we assume that they are so old that they can't do this and they can't do that, right? But that is not what we meant here. So what we want to point out is sometimes when they do things differently or they don't interact the same way as you expect, then there may be some reason behind it. Old age can be one of them. Again, it comes back to is what is the purpose of interaction? When you volunteer, to support a senior, to say, for instance, accompanying the person to the doctor's appointment, So if that is what the main thing is, so the key thing is to get the senior safely from home to the doctor's office, right? And then with what's happening in between would add to the interest of it, if you engage in a conversation or, but if you're very quiet, there's nothing wrong with that. So kind of that is we would think if you really don't want to kind of engage the person, I'm not very skillful in talking to seniors or this person, very hard of hearing, unless the person really want to communicate. So kind of you would make some attempt to that. So kind of this is what we want to look at is just give that perspective that they may be, because of aging or they because older, they have some different issues in life.
Okay. So, when appropriate, ask questions. Try and clarify more what the messages that they're trying to get across, and that you understand each other and are able to move on from that and again consider what it's like for them. So.
Okay, next slide. I want to give you some context first. So for you to have this picture in your head, then we will go into a little bit of discussion of next slide. It's because it's a little bit controversial, with that. So we're just assuming that you are helping with someone who's okay. So just say RCD we have a gardening club. So we have a person who's older adult, senior, and so we're all going to this field trip to visit the plot, the community garden. So you're assigned to accompany this individual, okay? So in the trip, while you're going there, this person is asking you for some advice on something. So our tips here is don't give advice unless asked for. So what do you think? Now you're being asked. So the person may ask you, hey, I have this fight with my my husband. He's really getting very unreasonable. And even I'm already 70 years old. I want to get a divorce. What do you think? So, it all depends, how the conversation goes. Maybe you exactly want to refer, maybe you want to seek a marriage counselor.
Yeah.
Or, if they ask, then you can, maybe you can ask the organization, or if you know some information, that can do, right? So how about just less, private situation if they say, hey, I tried to book my doctor, my family doctor, and the person's really obnoxious. I went to see the person, and then they never listen to me. I want to kind of change a doctor. Can you recommend one? So again, there is no right or wrong answer. If you feel okay, my family doctor is really good. If you like to try, you can, and then give the information. It is not private information, right? They can actually look for the doctor's register everywhere, but and then sometimes it's the case, and then would you try to verify the story? So again, it's also depending on how comfortable you are sharing with your own information, or even when you give the fact, and that is also true. But sometimes again, it's refer them to maybe someone who can help them. It's a lot of times maybe to the nurse or to the they can go online to find a doctor and all this information, and then if they really want to do that, they can, right? How about if the person comes to you and then you see that, oh, the person has a black eye? What will you do? So it is a tricky one because it's pretty sensitive,
And it's
right?
personal.
Again, what happens is sometimes, even people falling, they can have a black eye. I wouldn't say self-inflicting, it's just accident. I've seen that, but a black eye is a sensitive thing because normally you associate that with some violence, right? So kind of concern is true. Maybe you want to kind of casually bring it up. Oh, what happened to your eye, right? If the person want to keep it to himself or herself, that is their choice. And I think it depends on the relationship with the individual, really. If you just meet the person for the first time, if you have some concern, I think as a volunteer, you need to talk to the staff person in charge and let them take it from there, right? But sometimes if you know the person, say a few more times, and you notice more injury coming up, that may be something of concern. Then you probably want to say, do you need some help? Like if understanding the situation. But again, saying all that, it is all very personal information and how much we disclose. And then sometimes it depends. If you describe it because as a volunteer, even sharing the information that the people sometimes call client, but the people you support, that they share with you, is it okay to share everything with the staff, with the supervisor? No. So sometimes we need to be a little bit sensitive, right? How we can, I wouldn't say manipulate, how we can make the circumstances so that you can actually report to the staff. Is if you notice something, you don't even, and then you feel that it's a bit fishy, or then you talk to the individual and there's something of concern, I probably wouldn't go into, we won't prop the person very deeply. Get to the point that you get all the thing reviewed, and then you suddenly, become the holder of all this information, and those are personal information of individual. You actually should not discuss that with anyone unless with the permission. So at that point, you probably need to ask, can I talk about this to the supervisor? If they say no, you really cannot. So that would be at a point you feel that, oh, maybe I have my suspicion. Then actually bring it to the supervisor before you get to know everything, and let them handle that, because they are in a more position if they are registered participant in their program, and let them handle that, because then it doesn't have come into that conflict. So sometimes we need to be a bit sensitive. However, there are always exceptions to the rule. If you feel that the person is in imminent danger, then you can share. So it comes to that is you feel that if this person goes home again, it might be beaten or killed or whatever, things that might happen, then we can raise that. And even without a lot of the situation, say for instance, when we have our children's summer camp, so one of the kind of the rule that we share with the volunteer is if they notice something very close to child abuse, and even they don't know the whole story and they have no evidence of that, we actually need to report it to the Ministry of Children and Family Development. And that is the responsibility of the service provider doing that. And then as a volunteer, you can share that as well when we suspect child abuse, right? So kind of that is the thing. It's not that the parent, the parents don't let them go to play. This is not, and so kind of we also need to make the judgment. So this is a little bit controversial, is when they ask for advice. So a lot of times is, be careful when you give advice. If you talk about your story, that is okay. If they ask you, I have a bit of saving, I want to invest. So what, what do you go into with your investment? And then you say, we should buy Coca-Cola stock. Okay, so at the end, the person really hit your suggestion and lost and lose some money. And whose responsibility into that? So you need to think a little bit about that, because that it is the boundary between giving advice and just kind of talking about it is kind of sometimes blurred. If you really quite good on a good relationship with individual, you will say, I do this, I kind of do that, but I don't know, I use my financial advisors. Those information are okay to share, but then just be careful what advice you're giving. Are you making suggestion for them to do, right? So like if they say, I have fight with my husband, just leave him. Like what happened if that really kind of become reality? right? We never know about that. But I think here is from the angle is as a volunteer. And then, how you do. If you're in doubt, always check with your supervisor on that one. Okay, so kind of discern what kind of advice is sought after, what are they asking for. Maybe they just want you to hear the story, they're venting. Then, say, okay, yeah, I heard it, right? And then, the weather is really good today. You can do that. And volunteer support should not include giving advice unless specified, or for casual subjects. So if your volunteer position is a counselor, say for instance with chemo crisis line, they are trained. You actually need to have a training for a year. I think it's a year. And then you work with them as a volunteer counselor on the crisis line. That is then your position is to give certain suggestions, recommendation, referral, and stuff like that. But if not, if your position is a companion to accompany the person to the gardening club, and then why would you start talking more about other things, right? If in doubt, refer to the service organization or staff and pay attention to the emotions of the senior. So sometimes, like this, if they are really, emotion is very difficult to say. You cannot judge just saying, like maybe the person is feeling really sad or really, or crying, and we need to stay calm and don't make a big thing out of it and see what it is about. Really, it doesn't mean that they have emotion outburst that is a very serious thing, or vice versa. Even they have no emotion, that is a minor thing. That may not be the case.
So you want to choose your priorities when you're trying to solve problems, when you're working on that to-do list, helping the senior get through things. Ella mentioned a craft class earlier. And if that person wants to make their craft in this way versus that way, that's not something that really, I think, needs to be argued with. I think it's not it doesn't matter if it turns out this way or that way. Maybe it's learning from experience. Whereas if it's a little bit more of an important issue, what do I do with my belongings? Where do I put them? How long can I stay here? My family doesn't see me. What kind of things I'm finding it hard to communicate. How does my banking? Those are the kinds of things, and then maybe together, including the senior in the decision making, make it a list of priorities in the way that it goes first. And Vincent, when he was talking about children with disabilities, talked about the first then strategy. Maybe we can do this first and then work on the craft. Or maybe we can work on the craft and then do a little bit of banking, do one thing at a time, and the next week we'll do something else. And so that it's not too overwhelming. Because in all of our lives we get overwhelmed by all the things we have to do, and if we're not as able as we used to be, it's nice to be able to prioritize and get the help doing that.
So you see a lot of the strategies you can use just across the spectrum, right? They're like I say, they're all common sense. And choose priority is very important. Sometimes as a volunteer, you need to hold your ground. When to do that? When it comes to safety, the personal safety, some safety issues, if the person wants to do something really risky, then you probably need to hold your ground. A no is a no, right? So, kind of that we need to choose what is important, and we don't kind of fight over every tiny things. Like if they want to color the umbrella in red rather than suggest the blue, what's the big deal, right? So you won't argue with that. But sometimes you need to be very firm with what you be assertive and be firm on certain things if it will kind of involve some safety issues. So kind of that is the main thing to do. Okay, so number 10, laugh when you can. So if it is not a serious thing, and then we want to make the volunteer experience pleasant for both you and the people you're supporting, laugh when you can. Sometimes that is the best medicine, the best way to communicate. It is the best medicine to things, and be open up to opportunity to light things up. So this is very important. Don't just laugh meaninglessly and then, laugh. The thing is, kind of whenever there's an opportunity coming up, just lighten up, right? Say something. And the best thing is, like to laugh at yourself first. And then don't laugh at other people, right? Like we can do that. And then ease the tension with a shared laugh something together. And be sure to laugh with the person, not at the person, right? So nobody like to be teased or laughed at. So we want to laugh together. So sometimes we would always say, okay, about yourself first. Because, again, it depends on how much you want to disclose about yourself. Because that is a very fine line as well. We are not asking you to lie to please the people you support. Whatever we do, we want to do it with integrity and honesty, right? So if you don't feel like sharing your information, there's no need to. But if you feel okay, then you can share, okay, I do it this way. And then if there's time to have a laugh, then we laugh, right? But again, that is the same with a lot of the situation is you can, then it is not putting the liability on you. That you're not telling the person what to do. You're not saying what is right, what is wrong, right? But that is the way you do it. And we respect the way people do things.
So just to review the things that when we're interacting with seniors, again, you want to sit face to face with them, allow them to know that you're paying attention, that you want to hear, and you want to deliver your message and respond appropriately. You want to not be distracted and not to have them distracted in case they have eyesight issues, hearing issues, and so on. And make sure their lighting is appropriate if you know the person needs that for visual needs, and communicate clearly at an even pace, unlike what I do, and try to choose words carefully. Instead of I tend to babble sometimes and go on, and sometimes if I just shorten those words into simple sentences, it gets my message across, and it makes the conversation much more effective. And maintaining eye contact and active listening. Looking at that person's face. What are they saying with their body language? What are they saying with their eye contact? Are they looking at you? Do they seem like they're listening to you and want to know what you're saying? And do they seem listening to their tone of voice? Do they sound sad? Do they sound happy? Sometimes it's not just the words that we communicate, it's also all of those things to go with it. And when we have to repeat things 3-4 times and do things in different ways and set things up just so it all takes time, and patience matters.
So it's clear, communication is really, we cannot find any more new things to talk to you, so there's no more communication training. But you can see a lot of them are overlapping, and then you can use them in any circumstances, age-friendly communication, people-friendly communication, right? So we are very with good control of time. So the next one, I'm going to show you a very short video. It is a video of a nursing home in Australia. So they talk about, some of the importance of communication to the residents there and how they viewed it and what is a good communication that, to them.
Have you ever stopped to think what your ability to communicate means to you? Can you imagine your life without communication? We speak, on average, 150 words per minute and 16,000 words a day to make requests, to express our feelings, to share stories and connect with friends. Irrespective of a person's age, place of residence or circumstances, communication is an intrinsic part of everyday life and interactions.
For me, communication, that's what it is. It's your identity, who you really are.
Every day, even just talking to your family is absolutely essential to dignity of life.
To me, it's just a normal, natural thing to do. If you can't communicate, you're out of this world, aren't you?
95% of people living in residential aged care facilities have at least one communication impairment. This might include difficulties speaking clearly, thinking of words, understanding others, reading, writing, or keeping up with fast-paced conversation.
It robs a person of the most vital human need, which is speech. What I find difficult for her is it puts her in a passive position, and she relies on people to interpret what she's thinking or what she wants. And the sad thing about that, I think, is she never was a passive person. She was an active person in her life and a great advocate, and that makes it very difficult. But I see in her great courage to interact as well as she can under the circumstances. She smiles, she laughs, she engages with her eyes, she has a joke, you know, she can still make herself known in that way.
But I think it is very important. I used to miss my husband not talking to me.
I think communication between people is great, and I feel sorry for people who have no opportunity for that.
I think it must frustrate her. You know, she doesn't say anything. But sometimes when she's trying to tell me something, and I just can't understand what she's trying to say, I think sometimes the look is enough to say, what's wrong? Can you understand? You know, it must be frustrating for her. People that are there think that Madeline can't communicate, so they don't ask her anything. So Madeline's sort of in the background and just listening, but it's trying to get people, you know, not just myself, but other people to communicate, to talk to her and get her to answer in some way.
Communication matters and should be seen as a necessity, not a luxury. We all need to work together to uphold every person's basic right to communication. This is an achievable goal. Each person has communication strengths within, in some cases sitting beneath the surface, waiting to be unlocked or revealed. Each person has potential to interact, to make informed choices, to convey basic wants and needs. With time, creativity and support, communication can and should be improved.
The way we relate to our families, friends and carers is crucial to us actually having an engaged life. So it's really central, and you can communicate in a variety of ways. So all those ways should be encouraged to optimise the person's ability to take part and be part of a community.
Pictures, written words, gesture, touch, facial expression. All modes of communication should be drawn upon. This provides access to communication for those who need it, slowing down the pace, highlighting keywords and finding new, innovative ways around communication roadblocks. Help us start the conversation and create rich, supportive, interacting environments in aged care settings. Join the Communication Challenge. Help make communication a priority for all.
So it's quite a good video, you know, like it mentioned a lot of the techniques we talk about. And then I hope, you know, like with all this information you brought back, then you would practice it and then applied it in the in the real situation.